Today is the 23rd of July 2009, and we finished the first book of the Samyutta Nikaya. Now we come to the second book. This second book is called the Nidana Vaga, the book of causation. And this book contains 10 Samyuttas. And the first is the Nidana Samyutta. And the Nidana Samyutta takes up almost half of the book. This is a very important topic in early Buddhism. So this Nidana means cause or source or origin or condition. This has the same meaning as paticca samuppada, dependent origination. But instead of calling it the paticca samuppada samyutta, which is maybe too long, they call it the Nidana Samyutta. Now there are many suttas concerning this topic. Most of it are in this book that we are going to go into, this particular chapter. But even in the Digha Nikaya, there's the longest sutta on this topic, paticca samuppada, dependent origination, and it is called the Maha Nidana Sutta. Now, I quote here from the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's introduction of his translation of the Samyutta Nikaya. He says here, dependent origination is one of the central teachings of early Buddhism, so vital to the teaching as a whole that the Buddha is quoted as saying in the Majjhima Nikaya, one who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma, and one who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination. So if you understand dependent origination, this chapter, the suttas in this chapter that we are going to go through, then you would have seen the Dhamma, and when you have seen the Dhamma, you would have attained stream entry. The ultimate purpose of the teaching on dependent origination is to expose the conditions that sustain the round of rebirths, samsara, so as to show what must be done to gain release from the round. This topic exposes the conditions that sustain samsara. Actually goes step by step to unravel the origin of suffering. And there are 12 conditions. There are 12 conditions. So the Pali formula we often chant. It's avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vinyanang paccaya namarupang, namarupang paccaya salayatanang, like that, right up down to birth, jati, then all the other types of suffering. So when you recite in this way, it says ignorance gives rise to volition, and volition gives rise to consciousness, etc. So finally ends up with suffering. So this is called the origination forward sequence. In Pali is anuloma. Then the other way of reciting it, which we often do, is avijja yatveva asesa viraga nirodha sankhara nirodho sankhara nirodha, etc. So the other way is the cessation or reverse sequence. That means ignorance ceases, then volition ceases, and because of ignorance ceasing, then volition ceases, and when volition ceases, then consciousness ceases, in that order. In the end, suffering ceases. at this point we are going into the deeper part of the Dhamma, unlike the first book. So now, according to the traditional interpretation, these 12 links of dependent origination can be broken into 3 lifetimes: the past, the present, and the future. And they say it is because of the past ignorance and the past volition that in the present life you have consciousness, you have nama rupa, you have 6 sense bases, contact, feeling. These are the present effects. And then in the present life, craving, clinging and existence causes future birth. And future birth will come along with the aging and dying. So they break it up into 3 lifetimes. But I've written a book on this subject, dependent origination. I have explained that there are certain suttas that the Buddha has spoken where the Buddha only considers 2 lifetimes, present and the future lifetime. And there are some monks also say that these 12 links you can refer to only 1 lifetime, the present lifetime, since the Buddha says that the Dhamma is sanditiko, can be seen in this present lifetime. So all the 12 links you should be able also to see in this present lifetime. But without explaining too much, we can go straight into the suttas in the Nidana Samyutta. Okay, now we go to the first sutta. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anatha Pindika's park. There the Blessed One addressed the monks thus: Monks, Venerable Sir, those monks replied. The Blessed One said this: Monks, I will teach you dependent origination. Listen to that and attend closely. I will speak. Yes, Venerable Sir, those monks replied. The Blessed One said this: And what, monks, is dependent origination? With ignorance as condition, avijja, volition comes to be. Here, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated as volitional formations. Volitional formations. And later, you can see the traditional interpretation by the later monks is that volitional formation, sankhara here, means karma. But as I have said in my book, Dependent Origination, I don't agree with it. Later you will see why. So here, instead of translating it as volitional formations, which Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi uses, I would just say volition, sankhara. In fact, in the 5 aggregates, you also have sankhara there. And in the 5 aggregates, 5 aggregates means the 5 aggregates of a being, body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. So that is also basically body and mind. So because we take ourselves to be this body and this mind. So inside the 5 aggregates, you notice the 4th one is volition, and it's the same word, sankhara. So there it's mentioned to be volition. So here you can also call it volition. The same word, the same meaning. So with ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. With volition as condition, consciousness comes to be. With consciousness as condition, name and form, nama rupa, sometimes it's translated as mentality, materiality. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases, salayatana. With 6 sense bases as condition, contact, phassa. With contact as condition, feelings, vedana. With feeling as condition, craving, tanha. With craving as condition, clinging, upadana. With clinging as condition, existence. bhava. Here is translated as existence, but I think I prefer the word being. But never mind, for the moment, we continue as with existence as conditioned birth, jati. With birth as conditioned aging and death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair come to be. This in Pali is jara, maranang, soka, parideva, dukkha, domana, supayasa. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. This monks is called dependent origination. I stop here for a moment. So here you see this whole chain of 12 links, dependent origination, is actually explaining the dependent origination of suffering. Because to untangle this mass of suffering, we have to understand where suffering comes from. So these 12 links is trying to explain where suffering comes from. You see the final link is called aging and dying, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair. So this is the whole mass of suffering. Aging and sickening and dying, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, sometimes called grief, grief and despair. So all this is suffering. So later you'll see when they explain backwards, the Buddha will ask, where does this aging and dying, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair come from? It comes from birth. Once you have birth, you must have aging and dying, etc. So it traces it the other way. So this is called dependent origination, and you always must remember when we say dependent origination, in the Buddha's teachings, it's always dependent origination of suffering. To continue. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. With the cessation of volition, cessation of consciousness. With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of name and form, nama rupa, or mentality and materiality. With the cessation of mentality and materiality, cessation of the six sense bases. With the cessation of the six sense bases, cessation of contact. With the cessation of contact, cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling, cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging or attachment, cessation of existence, of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. This is what the Blessed One said. Elated, those monks delighted in the Blessed One's statement. So here you see there are two ways of this dependent origination. The first one is the arising of suffering, and the other one, when he talks about cessation of each one of the links, is the cessation of suffering. Now we go into the second sutta, which explains each of these 12 conditions. At Savatthi, monks, I will teach you dependent origination, and I will analyze it for you. Listen to that and attend closely. I will speak. Yes, Venerable Sir, those monks replied. The Blessed One said this. And what, monks, is dependent origination? With ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. With volition as condition, consciousness, exactly as in the preceding sutta. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. And what, monks, is aging and death? The aging of the various beings in the various orders of beings. They are growing old.